それで？でも私お金がなかったからつい体で払います。
See?
それから住み込みで働くことに。
Yeah, so not only is she in danger of becoming homeless, she's also in debt. If that doesn't deserve a sigh, I mean, I don't know what does. She needs to learn the Republican way of pulling herself up by the bootstraps and getting a job. I mean, I'm trying to think of what job she would work. What, I guess like a cafe position? Like a waitress? That's usually pretty easy. She can always become like, you know, the desk lady at the castle. That's one avenue for work. I don't know if she'd want to go into janitorial service, but I'm sure that's around. I mean, it's hard to figure out exactly where she could work because we've seen exactly one street of the city. Join the military today. I mean, that one would work. Except you think she would join the military. Fantasy Lockheed Martin. I mean, it would be nice to even join non-fantasy Lockheed Martin. Although there are machines. In the intro it did mention how like machines were causing problems or whatnot, and then somebody helped fix them and things like that. So maybe, which to be fair, the person that sorted it out is an alchemist and is literally her mentor, so it's like she's already there. Except it's like the situation in this game where if Lockheed Martin, you know, was going bankrupt and couldn't employ anybody. That's kind of the situation they're in right now, so I don't know if Fantasy Lockheed would really help. There's a booming IT and engineering industry she needs to get into. I mean, if she can invent the first computer, she'd be set for life, I guess.
かわいそうなもんですか。で、そのことあの女はもう知ってるの？
Fantastic podcast idea. Two Republican men complain about anime girls and telling them how to man up and get jobs. I mean, I don't know who would do that, but I mean, I don't think it even has to be two Republican men. I think it could just be anybody. But that definitely would be a fantastic podcast idea. Maybe without the complaining part, but yeah, figuring out how to get these anime girls jobs would, you know, that would be a conversation. I can't tell you if it would be a great conversation, but that would definitely be a conversation. Because, well, there's a lot of context. Because when you choose the character, you have to be like, okay, well, what is happening in their society at the moment? You know, what are the opportunities? You know, any potential barriers that might impact their job prospects, you know, the works, which I'm trying to think. A lot of, well, I can't say a lot of them, but when I think, the first thing that comes to mind is like isekai anime, where it's like, they already failed in the real world and now they're in fantasy land. Well, what job would they get in fantasy land? Well, it really does depend on the series, and a lot of it is just go be an adventurer, so to speak. We analyze Japanese anime media worlds and their economic developments to determine job prospects. I mean, I'll be honest with you, that sounds fun. It does sound fun. Well, we'll have to put that on the list somewhere, but that does also involve, you know, watching the anime and learning economics, which, you know, we can eyeball it here and there.
その嫌みったらしい呼び方はやめろっていつも言ってるでしょ。
Although, that does remind me of, like, I have a friend, whenever we play D&D, he always gives, not necessarily me, but also me, and also the creators of the game a hard time for how economics works. You know, and how a loaf of bread can be like 5 copper, but, you know, a sword is like 5 gold. And, you know, it's how economies in a lot of games, and I'm sure in a lot of shows as well, is based on the gameplay rather than how a lot of things might actually work. This line goes up, so that means this line goes down, which is expected. Good point is in the intersection. Yes, you need a proper economy in your story. You do. Also ruins the immersion, which, to be fair, I guess half of the immersion could be that the economy physically does not matter. Like, especially when things are really small scale, like you're in like a really specific part of the world, or you're in Fantasyland where economy really doesn't mean anything, then I guess the economy of the story isn't amazingly important. It's kind of funny to think about, you know, to consider while you're creating the story. You know, oh, I'm creating my own currency because this is my own world, and, you know, how much would X amount of this currency, you know, what is its purchasing power, so to speak? You know, the thing that we have to deal with in real life when it comes to having so many different currencies around the world is relative to each other, what is their purchasing power? That's how you generally determine whether a currency has become, you know, more valuable or less valuable, or whether it's outright useless. It is a very broad topic, and it is very complex, and it is very interesting. Ah, yes, one of the universal truths of a lot of things really is that debt has to be repaid. Like, I see people all the time who go through several credit cards. They're out there, you know, and they're like, oh, I can pay it back at some point, and they end up not being able to, and interest piles up. So yes, be very careful of debt. This how old is she again? 14-year-old girl and her family had no other means of dealing with it because, well, if they didn't pay, they would be dead. Some things you just can't control, unfortunately. Fantasy student loans. Honestly, why doesn't fantasy have more student loans? Like, we see all of these series where it's like, oh, here's this big, prestigious magic academy or whatnot, and how do none of them pay loans? You know, like, I know in a lot of those cases it's like, oh yeah, it's, you know, rich people only, so to speak, which, you know, makes the most sense. That's how you would get away with having to take out loans to begin with. But then you also have, put the American dystopia into our fantasy stories. I don't know why you would want to. But yeah, but you have all of the, in a lot of these series, you know, be it the protagonist or the friends of the protagonist or whatnot, you know, are being like, oh yeah, we're the normal guys who are also just here, and, you know, we're persevering through all of this really prestigious academy. And then it doesn't really mention how they pay their loans. Because, you know, they didn't have the money to begin with. You know, or sometimes they just kind of write it off as, it's fine, you're on scholarship. Even if, in a lot of cases, they're not particularly better at what they do compared to some of the people who aren't there on scholarship. Which, you know, even if you are wealthy enough to get into the academy, if you are also smart enough to get scholarship, then, you know, why don't they, you know? It's one of those things that you'd have to kind of experience student loans to just subconsciously pick it up whenever you're listening to a story. They must all go by the European standards. I don't actually know what the European standards are, you're gonna have to explain them. They basically have free college? Huh, interesting. I mean, I do also know that they generally pay higher taxes. I guess that's probably where that goes to, but I feel like they have other requirements for getting in though if the cost is waived that much. Because whenever college is free, then college has to basically fund itself through other avenues, in most cases being either donations from people who really like the school, you know, the alumni, or government funding, which government funding comes from taxation. So is it really free? And, you know, even if it is, at what cost? Europe just has better tax and government funding. I mean, to be fair, a lot of countries in Europe are also working with significantly less land than, you know, in the States. Like they think the entirety of France can fit inside Texas, land mass-wise. So I'm sure logistically they would have not necessarily less to spend in other areas, but no excuses. Hey, I'm just giving you potential explanations. But yeah, it's because it's like there are a lot of countries where you get taxed a lot more than you do over here, for better and for worse. Like in a lot of places where there's like free healthcare, usually that comes out of tax dollars. So, you know, you're paying for it one way or another.
ですよね。